Hey everyone, thanks for being here. I'm going to play a tune for a second while I wait for people to show up. How's the audio on the keyboard? Good, thanks, Tim. All right, hey everyone, thanks for being here. I just wanted to, I've been thinking about live streaming stuff for a while. I did some lessons like about a year back, and then I did some other stuff on YouTube, and I just decided I wanted to jump in and just talk about more stuff that's in my head. I got a good response from the thing I did yesterday, and wanted to make some more. So today I wanted to talk about the creative process, kind of in terms of composing, but also just in making stuff in general. I think a lot of people want to create stuff and have an interest in making art, making music, but there's all sorts of roadblocks we get stuck with right away, and I wanted to talk about my experience with some of these roadblocks and things I do to overcome them. So the first thing I want to talk about was actually something Mark Flugie told me, which back when I was in school, I asked him about composing one day, and he had some awesome insight about it that I wanted to share. So the thing he said, I kind of asked him, how do you compose music? How do you get inspiration to compose music? And he explained that if you want to compose, if you wait around for inspiration, you're kind of going the wrong way, because maybe you're inspired to compose once every 2 weeks. Well, that means at the most your output of music is going to be, 26 songs a year. If once every 2 weeks you are inspired to sit down and compose. And even from that, you can't assume it's going to be good. You can't assume that you're going to have all the techniques together that you would like to have together. So he kind of made this great observation. It's like people aren't afraid of watching TV for an hour, but people will be afraid to decide to sit down to compose because there's kind of this fear. It's like, oh, what if what I write isn't very good? And people basically don't write anything at all because they're afraid of what they're writing is going to be dumb. And his argument was that he threw away upwards of 90% of what he composed, but by composing so much and throwing a bunch of it away, that 10% that he didn't throw away was like golden, and that was really the good stuff. And in order to get to that point, he had to write a bunch of other stuff that he ended up throwing away. I think the author of the Game of Thrones series, the Song of Fire and Ice series, George R.R. Martin, he writes in a similar style where he'll write a whole bunch and then go through and delete and delete and delete. And maybe per 10,000 words he writes, he only keeps 500 of them or 1,000 of them. But those 500 magic words wouldn't have happened were he to not write all that other stuff. So I think sometimes people shoot themselves in the foot before they even decide to compose anything. And this, could apply to more than just composing. It could apply to, drawing a painting or going out and taking pictures or woodworking or working on a car or anything that's creative that people want to do. I think people sometimes shoot themselves in the foot, and before they even start the thing they were trying to start, they have this expectation that what they want to make has to be good. And you're judging what you're doing before you've even made it. And that's like setting yourself up on starting on a bad foot, so that the thing that you make, you're kind of screwing yourself, where it's like, oh, what I play better be good. And at least in my experience, when I have that mentality, I just am afraid of playing a note, because it's like, oh my gosh, it's if I write something that's not good, it's a waste of time. So kind of Mark's lesson was, you got to go for it. And what I've realized is you can't judge what you're creating. Judgment's a funny thing. There's all this talk about like, don't judge. And I think there's kind of this conflation of like, people are so worried about judging things and judging each other, they like can't decide to pick on anything. And there's a level of like, you have to judge what you're doing, because like if you're playing music without any judgment, it's going to be all the notes at all the time. It's like, I'm not going to judge which note should go next in the song, so every note's going to go. There's like a level of like, you have to discriminate and judge what's coming next, but you can't judge yourself and judge your worth based on what you're writing. And you can't judge like, oh, this thing I'm going to write has to be of a certain caliber or else it's not good. A lot of it has to do with just like going for it, and despite insecurities and inadequacies you feel about it. I think whenever I am trying to write music, like when I am trying to write music and I go, this next thing I write, I want it to be for Safety Squad. That is always shooting myself in the foot, where if I go, this next thing I write is going to be for my band, all of a sudden I've got a lot of conceptions about what Safety Squad music is supposed to sound like. I have ideas of music is supposed to be X, Y, and Z, and it's not supposed to be A, B, and C. And when I say I'm going to sit down and compose, and I'm going to write something that's going to fit for Safety Squad, I kind of psych myself out, where anything I play, if I feel like it's too in one direction or another, or it sounds too much like this song, or doesn't sound enough like this song, all of a sudden I'm just sitting staring at a blank piece of paper, wishing I could write something and too afraid to. But whenever I sit down and say, okay, I'm writing something, usually 7 times out of 10, the thing I write, I get done with it, I go, oh, this would be perfect for Safety Squad. And if it's not, who cares? I have something. I wrote this like samba. This was over a year ago at this point. I wonder if I can still play it. But when I decided to write music 10 days in a row. And the products of that turned into the second Safety Squad album. But one of the days I ended up writing this samba that Safety Squad would never play, but I think it's great still. Let me see if I can play it. I haven't played it in a while. Start there. But I wrote this 32-bar samba when I made this challenge myself. It's like, I'm going to write 10 days in a row. I kind of set, like, I guess a minimum limit of 8 measures of music, but that wasn't the important part. The important part was 8 days in a row, I'm going to write something. And a lot of the stuff I write turned into stuff that was on the second Safety Squad album. The Singularity came out of that. The Big Crunch came out of that. Sequence Break came out of that. And Machine Learning came out of that. So 4 of the 6 songs on the Safety Squad album came from stuff I wrote when I said I'm going to write 10 things in a day. But this thing I wrote, I ended up writing this 32-measure samba that Safety Squad never played. I've only played it on, maybe 3 or 4 gigs. But I feel like being able to write, first of all, I think it's good, and I could use it on a project. I could use it on a gig. Yo, what's up, Will? Thanks for being here, dude. I could use it on a project that might fit for, but also, had I not gotten that out of my system, had I not gotten that out of my system, other stuff that became Safety Squad music may not have ever happened. Tim, what's up, dude? Tim says, I get inspired by the feeling of who I'm with. That would start with a rhythm and then try to match the vibe. It normally takes me back to a memory from the 80s and early 90s. Very cool. Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of a good segue into one of my points about writing music is you're saying you start with a rhythm. Usually when I'm writing, the first thing I'm able to come up with is a bass line. Not sure why, but that's just kind of what it is. Probably just something about the way my ears have developed. But I think just starting with something, you're saying you just start with a rhythm. I think a lot of people get overwhelmed. I don't know what the term is, but there's a term for like you can get paralyzed by choice. I know analysis paralysis is a term people use, but like choice overload is something that happens a lot where it's like, I want to write a piece of music. And you get so paralyzed by the limitless possibilities in drum and percussion. It makes sense why rhythm would start first. But people get paralyzed by given so many options that they never are able to just limit themselves to just one thing. So I think when you're trying to write music, the best thing you can do is just pick something. You know, it could be, this is going to be in a key. I'll pick the key of A flat. I'm going to write a song in the key of A flat. Or I'll pick, it's going to be in 4/4. Or I'll pick, it's going to be a samba. Or it's going to, you know, be a 3-bar phrase. You could pick any sort of, there's like 1,000 elements and just pick one. And then you can also start to pick a couple. So I could do something in A flat major in 3/4. So right there, I just came up with an 8-bar phrase. That actually might be a 6-bar phrase. 3, 4, 5. That's a 12-bar thing, and then I had to start over. And you might be thinking, well, like, yeah, but Danny, you played piano for a long time. You've written a lot of music. You were able to just, how were you able to just improvise something like that? It's a good question. The first thing I would say is, I think sometimes people, when they compose, they get afraid of using stuff they already know how to use. Because it's easy to make it feel contrived right away. But you have to be confident in who you are. Composing teaches you a lot. It teaches you how to, you know, put something out there and not be afraid of how it's going to be perceived. You know, I know the key of A flat. I know I can use 2 5s to go to different centers and make something happen. And all the stuff I've learned, all the scales, all the different chords, all the different progressions, I can use little pieces of stuff I already know to come up with something that's going to be exciting and new, even though it's composed of stuff that's familiar. I think a lot of younger composers get stuck in this rut where they feel like what they write has to be hip or fresh or cool. And it's like, can you write with very, very simple elements? I've had this idea for if I were ever to teach a composition class, I would force everybody to try to write something using just like a 1 chord, a 4 chord, and a 5 chord. So maybe you're watching, maybe you don't quite know what that is if you're not a musician or whatever, but basically 1 chord, if you are a musician, you should know about this, but the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord are like the basic chords of any key. And any song on the radio or any kind of folk song or kids song is going to comprise of those songs. So a lot of people, especially a jazz-minded person, might think like, oh, you know, there's the joke, it's like 3-chord pop songs. Wow, it's so easy. Anyone could do it. And it's like, for me, it's like, okay, put your money where your mouth is. Can you compose something? Can you make a chord progression that you are happy with from the 4 chord, the 5 chord, the 1 chord? And the thing is you realize just by limiting yourself to that stuff, that thing, there's like a million different things you could do. So if I wanted to come up with a 4-bar thing using those chords, I could go like 4, 1, 5, and then another measure of 5. There's a 4-bar phrase right there. You could build a whole song off this. And the thing about something simple like that is you can start with a simple skeleton, and then if you want to make it more complicated, if you have a simple skeleton to start from, you can use a knowledge of theory or a trial and error to try and come up with new stuff. So just 1, 4, and 5 chord, I could come up with any sort of progression, you know, 5, 4, 5, 4, 1. Repeat that. The point is, I know I'm kind of going in a bunch of different directions here. That's kind of the fun of doing this live, is just going for it. But you could come up with you could take just a 3-chord and limit yourself to kind of one type of thing. I think kind of my idea with saying limit yourself to 1, 4, and 5 chord is a lot of people might kind of scoff at that and say, oh, wow, like that's like writing a song which is 1, 4, and 5. Like that'd be easy like that. Anyone can do that. It's like, well, guess what? The songs on the radio that are worth millions and millions of dollars are just that. So if you really think you're above that, like you're kind of missing the point there. And if you can be creative with that, then you can be creative with anything. A lot of people think, oh, I need to be creative with like the most crazy chords in the world. It's like, how can you think you're going to be creative with these like complex chord progressions with all sorts of stuff if you can't make something you're happy with that uses a more simple element of it? And I think that kind of goes back to the thing I was saying earlier about judging what you're doing. Is people go into it thinking, I have to make something good, or I have to make something new, or I have to make something exceptionally creative or groundbreaking or X, Y, or Z. And it's like, if you come into it with all these judgments, you're not actually judging the music, you're judging yourself. You're bringing your ego on board, where you're saying like, this has to be a certain way for me to feel good about it. Kind of like putting yourself in this spot of like, you're judging your value as a person based off the thing you're about to compose that you haven't composed yet. And of course, that's going to put you in a zone where you're going to be too afraid to actually write a note down or play a single note, because you're going to be too afraid to. You've set it up like an impossible expectation for yourself. I wanted to tell a story about one time when I was having writer's block and how I overcame it. I write lists for myself every day, where when I wake up, usually right after I make breakfast, I'll sit down and I'll write the date and I'll write what time I woke up, what I've done so far, and what I plan to do that day. Or maybe not necessarily what I plan to do, but I just write things that need to get done, and I pick things to put on the agenda for the day. And back in, I think, December or so, I remember I had a day where I composed 8 measures. And I got through the whole day, and at the end of the day, I didn't write 8 measures. So the next day when I wrote my list, I wrote compose 4 measures. End of the day, same thing. I didn't write 4 measures. Next day when I got up, I wrote compose 2 measures. Still at the end of the day, I didn't do it. So it got down to either like 1 measure or half a measure, like 1 or 2 days later. And basically I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. I'm going to compose 1 measure of music. And sure enough, once I sat down to write, I didn't write just 1 measure. I wrote 8 measures. So I think there's an element of kind of what I was saying before about if you're judging the value of what you're about to create before you've created it. If you set your goal too high, you're also shooting yourself in the foot before you start. If you go, I'm going to, what I was saying way before is when I say I'm going to write a song that's going to be on the next Safety Squad album, I've set this precedent of like, it has to be at least this good. When you don't know what you're about to write, it could be bad, and that's okay. The point is to get it out there. So I think sometimes people set these high goals for themselves, and this is kind of a more than a music lesson, is set your goals low. I know it sounds silly, but like if you go, I'm going to write a 10-minute symphony or a 10-minute big band piece, or write 50 measures of music or 100 measures of music or whatever, oftentimes that goal you're setting is going to be so high that you're not actually going to be able to meet that. Set it really low. Set it to 4 measures of music, 2 measures, 1 measure. My buddy Marty told me he's got a good trick where if he doesn't feel like practicing, he says, I'm going to pick up my bass and play 1 note. Sure enough, once he picks up his instrument and plays 1 note, he like remembers how fun it is, and then he wants to play more than that. So aim your goal really, really low. You know, it's all the time people say, I'm getting my life together. Tomorrow I'm waking up at 6 a.m. and then I'm going to go to the gym, and then I'm going to cook a healthy breakfast, and then I'm going to read 5 chapters of a book, then I'm going to practice my instrument for 3 hours, then I'm going to do this, this, and that. And, you know, the reality is you maybe do that one time, but then the next day you can't keep the momentum of that going. But if you say, you know, tomorrow I want to compose music, tomorrow I'm going to write 1 measure of music. You've set a goal that you know you can achieve, and then that success builds momentum until maybe 2 years down the road, it's like, yeah, I write 40 measures of music every day, but you don't get there unless you start with a much smaller goal. Tim asked, do you ever try to write in the form of another artist? Yes, I do. I think that's a good thing to consider, is have a goal to write in a style of someone. I think that's a type of activity where if you have a teacher who can help guide you along that, you're going to reach some more success. And I also think, you know, I think about some of the, when I've explicitly tried to write in the style of someone else, sometimes I would do that when I was taking lessons from Mark, and I would bring it in. I'd say, hey, I tried to write a bebop song, and he would just tear it to pieces, which was awesome because he was a great teacher and he really knew how to say, like, this doesn't work because of this, and this doesn't work because of this. But other songs I've written, I don't know how explicitly I was trying to write in the style of someone else, but you know, back in 2014, I was obsessed with like the Dave Holland Quintet and the Chris Potter Underground Band, and I wrote a couple songs in that style. One of them, this is called Get To It. It's in 15. Yeah, Tim says still has your artistic voice in it, though. Exactly. Yeah, I was like obsessed with this one Dave Holland album. It was Dave Holland Extended Play Live at Birdland. First time I heard it, it was, you know, one of those albums where you feel like your head explodes, and I just listened to it nonstop for probably 6 months or so. And I couldn't say exactly how explicitly I was saying I'm going to try and write songs in the style, but I know while I was listening to it, I was like, man, this band is so cool. I need to learn how to write music like this. And I just remember I was in the shower one day, and that bass line came into my head. So I got out of the shower, went to the piano, played it, figured it out, wrote it down, and then the song kind of spilled out. So still has your artistic voice in it, though. I think that's actually a good point to bring up, the artistic voice thing. I think sometimes people get so worried about being original with what they were writing and having their own voice on it. But the reality is like your own voice is going to come through no matter what you write. And if you're trying to write in the style of someone else, it's still going to sound kind of like you at the end of the day. I think a great example in jazz history is the Wayne Shorter album, Juju. He hired John Coltrane's band and wrote a lot of music in the style of Coltrane. But they still sound really, really like Wayne tunes. Even though they've got that Train influence on them, it's like there's no way Wayne could have written an album that would have sounded exactly like Coltrane's stuff. Even though he hired Coltrane's band and was like trying to write like John Coltrane, it still had Wayne's artistic voice on it. So I think kind of a way that people shoot themselves in the foot is with that. It's kind of goes hand in hand with that judgment thing where they have this expectation about what they need to create. And part of that expectation might be like, oh, I've got to have my voice come through on this, but it's going to come through no matter what. And how do you even know what your voice sounds like until you've composed 100 pieces of music or 1,000 pieces of music or 10,000 pieces of music? When I was in high school, I wrote ska songs. You know, I wrote these. I wrote a bunch of these ska songs with lyrics where I was playing bass guitar and stuff, and that was almost 10 years ago at this point. I've written hundreds of songs since then, and my voice is different than it was then, but it doesn't matter. I'm trying to write the stuff that I like. Another thing I've been thinking about for the creative process, one tip that's helped me is I love setting timers on my phone, because these phones we have, this technology we have all around us, you know, everybody knows how insidious it is, how while we can, you know, record something on our phone and send it to our computer and send it out to the world, just the power in the technology, the severe drawback is it can suck our attention in all the time. And we can, as much as we try to do one thing, our phone can keep dinging. And it seems like sometimes the more you're trying to focus on something, the more your technology is yelling at you for your attention. So one thing I do when I try and compose is I'll set a timer for, you know, maybe 10 minutes, not usually super long, but about 10 minutes or so. And I'll put my phone on the other side of the room with that timer on, and I won't look at it until the timer goes off. And basically it's like, you're going to have something written in 10 minutes. And usually what happens is I spend about 5 minutes kind of messing around, kind of lollygagging and a little unsure. And then it's like, okay, 5 minutes has gone by, I'm going to make something. And then I get into a groove of something, and I've written a bunch of measures, and then the timer goes off. I'll turn off the timer, but now I'm in a zone and I want to write more and more. So I think there's power in putting a time limit on yourself. I'm a firm believer in deadlines on projects. Safety Squad has 2 albums, and both albums I had not written all of the music before I recorded the album. Or I'm sorry, before I booked the recording session. So the first album, it was like I had 1, maybe 2 songs written before I booked the session, and I wrote 4 more for that, and I didn't finish them until 2 of the songs I didn't even finish till the day before. But had I not booked the session, I probably would have been able to lollygag and not decide on something for longer and longer. I think there's certainly a level of, if you don't have a deadline, the decisions that must be made can be put off and can be put off and can be put off and can be put off. Because if you're writing something, you know, if you decide, like, let's say I'm playing the G chord, my first note is D. It's like, well, there's still hundreds of decisions that could be made. It's like, well, my melody could be, or it could be, or it could be, or it could be. And that was just 5 of actually infinite options of melodies that could start on the D over a G major chord. So it's easy when you don't have a deadline for yourself to go, oh, well, I like this, and I like this, and I like this. So I don't know what it's going to be. It's like I'm just going to kind of not decide. But if you set a timer for yourself, it's like in 10 minutes I'm going to have something written, you decide. Or if you say in 2 weeks I have this recording session booked where my money is on the line, where it's like I'm paying the guy to record us, I've rented out the space, you're going to decide. So I think deadlines are really important towards creativity. There's kind of this like weird notion that I think some people have where it's like, I want to be free when I'm creating. And it's like, that's almost the opposite of what you want. You want to kind of buckle down, and it's like imagine if I was like, I'm going to create something, and it could be anything. It's like, well, like, do I need to sit at the piano, or do I need to sit at a typewriter, or do I need to get a hammer and nails? It's like, what are you creating? It's like, decide. Like, that's obviously an extreme example of, it's like, if you're like, I want to be free with my creation, or I'm going to create whatever, it's like, then you're never going to decide it. You won't even know what tools to bring to the table. So, but even so, then take that in the terms of composition. It's like, I'm going to write a song, and I'm going to be open to anything that comes. It's like, okay, like eventually you have to clamp down on something. Eventually this openness to receiving whatever's going to come has to clamp down and say, okay, like we're in this key and we're in this thing and it's going to go, I've already written this much and that's going to influence what's coming next. I think a lot of the problem is a mental thing. I think people might think any reason you're not composing is a mental block, and it's important to figure out what's causing that mental block. And some of it might be, oh, I'm not good enough to write music. It's like, I want to be better before I write. Or it might be, I wrote this song that was really great. How am I going to write another song that's as good as that song? And you're afraid to write. Or you think, other people have written this music that's really great, and how can I write music that's gonna live up to that? And I think it's important, you know, write music for yourself more than anything, or you know, don't necessarily ever write music for other people. Write it for yourself, and if there's a spiritual component to it, if there's a higher deity you want to write music for, like that's a better place to start than saying I'm going to write music that's going to impress people, or I'm going to write music for these certain people, because people are fickle, and you're not going to write a music that everyone in the world is going to like. You know, maybe there's a handful of pieces of music that everybody likes, but it'd be hard to come up with one, or certainly not 5 or 10. So when you decide to write something, you're automatically limiting the people that are going to like it right away. And that's actually a freeing thing, because you should just write it for yourself. And maybe you're not even going to like it right away, but the next day you go for it is going to be good. Your mind is like a Venus flytrap to inspiration. Don't be picky and look for something. Yeah, exactly. Don't be picky and look for something. I think kind of, Tim, I get what you're saying. It's like just grab something. It's like, so I think right now might be a good time. I'm just going to try and write something. So I'm going to pick a key, and I'm going to just almost pretend like you guys aren't there. If you guys write something, I'll respond to it, but I'm going to try and come up with something. So I was writing a minor key, so I'm going to write in a major key. I'm going to write 8 measures in the key of, well, I was in A flat earlier. I'll pick A flat again. So let's see. Cool, I like that. So that was. So I just came up with a kind of a riffy kind of melody there. It just so happened that when I started trying to play something, it came out of the A flat, like pentatonic blues scale. And I think a trap somebody might fall into is they might say to themselves like, oh, like that like blues scale stuff, like that's so contrived. Or something I might say to myself, I write with a pentatonic scale a lot. I might be like, oh, wow, I came up with another thing with the pentatonic scale. That's stupid. I have to come up with something else. But I'm happy with this. I feel like I could do a lot of chords underneath this. 3 and I'm going to write it down. 2, 3, and boom, boom, 1, 2, 3, 4, ba, boom, ba-dum, ba-dum, do-da-da, da. That's gotta be like this, and then boom. I would also recommend maybe not using a pen until you're really comfortable, but I'm gonna go for it. So far, no mistakes. What did I play? there we go. So I didn't write a key signature, so I wrote in these accidentals. I don't know if this is seeable at all, but bo-ba-doo-bum, bum, bum, bo-ba-doo-bum, bum, bo-ba-doo, so there's an 8-bar melody I just wrote right there. I just improvised out this first thing, and I was happy with that, so I thought, well, might as well kind of respond to that phrase. So chords could be anything, we don't have them yet. And then I thought, so it was two 2-bar phrases, and then it should end with a 4-bar phrase. That whole thing could repeat hypothetically if I wanted. So yeah, I just came up with an 8-bar melody right there. I could do it twice, and then it's a 16-bar melody. And I'm not afraid of the fact that I'm using this scale that is a scale that is nothing groundbreaking. It's not, people have used the scale plenty of times. Most of my songs use a pentatonic scale. It's kind of just part of my voice, I guess. Thanks for being here, Tim. Glad you like it. Have a great night. 3 and so the beauty is, now that I have this, I could come up with a bunch of different ways to harmonize it. So I kind of did like a pretty simple one. I went 1, 2, 3, 6, 2, 5, and then I went 1, 7 dominant, flat 7 sus, 6, flat 6. That's just like one way I do it. That's a fairly safe way to do it. If I wanted to make something a little more crazy, I might do like, and also that was just 2 chords per measure basically. Let's say with that, you know, again, it's another choice you can make. So let's say with just 2 chords per measure, but I could come up with something maybe a little more radical. I already broke my rule. You know, the sky's kind of the limit. You basically, I could put any bass note beneath this melody. I kind of really arbitrarily picked my left-hand notes there, but if I did that really slowly, I can, as long as I have a good knowledge of theory, I could just know how to fill it in with notes that work. So here, what am I doing? A flat minor, G flat major, E major, because the melodies in E flat, G sus, B major, D half diminished, E major to F minor, E over F sharp, G over F, or F over G, E flat, or A flat over B flat, F over A flat major, G7 flat 9, F sharp, E major 7 over F sharp, you know, there's a million different ways I could harmonize that for maybe something more inside or less inside, but none of them are necessarily better than the other. I mean, I guess there is an objective level of, you could have like some really wrong notes in there. That might be pretty hard on the ears for most people. Although if you really commit to it, eventually it starts to sound good. It sounds like it's on purpose, but yeah, basically I just you know, I put myself on the spot. I said, I'm going to turn the camera on. I'm going to talk about this, not be totally sure what I'm going to talk about. And I'm going to come up with a melody that I'm going to write down. So I really liked some of those sus chords I was doing. Let me commit to something. I started. Yeah, I like that a lot. So what did I just play? So that was, let's see, I did like C over E for this first note. C. To get to like E flat major and then D minor to D flat 7. This is really cool. It's like an E flat minor over G flat 7, which would kind of be like just a G flat sus, G flat 13 sus. And then I kind of like these sus chords. What if I just took this? Okay, cool. I'm gonna stick with that. So it's like melody's a C, so it's an F over G. A flat triad over B flat. Maybe I'll go somewhere else here. Cool. So what do I do? F over G. A flat over B flat. B flat over C. Then I went B major. I did a circle of fours thing. B major 7, E major 7, A major 7. And then I'm going to kind of make it, I like doing just, so that was like 1, walk down to 6, so A flat major 7, G7 sharp 9, G flat 7 sus. I know this might not be the most exciting thing to watch, but it's okay. E major 7 to E flat 7 sus to E flat 7. So in the past, I think I started this around 30 minutes in or 42 minutes in. In 12 minutes, I came up with this melody. I wrote it down. 2, 3, and. I also don't know if this flipped. 3, and. 2, 3, and. So, and then I wrote these chords that go with it. So I came up with that right there. Ross says, can you describe at all how you're picking chords? I always get stuck in boring normie chords. Well, I don't know what time you started tuning in, but earlier I talked about I would like challenge people to try to write a song with normie chords, which is really funny. But I would challenge people to try and write something like just with like a 1, 4, 5 chord. Because if you like, I think people think like, oh, that's easy. But when you start to try and come up with it's like come up with 10 different ways you could get through 1, 4, and 5. That might be 1 4-bar loop. You know, do that a couple times. Another one might be, what if we went 4, 1, 4, 1, 5, or what if we went 5, 4, 5, 4, 1, 1, 5, 4, 5, 4, 1. You know, we go 5, 4, 1, 5, 1, something like that. So try to don't be discouraged by maybe your normie chords you're doing. It's really funny, and be like embrace being creative with a smaller set of stuff. Now, as far as for me picking these more complicated chords, I have learned that any melody note can be harmonized with any bass note. So like, let's take C as your melody note. If C is your bass note underneath C is your melody note, what are the different chords that could be? Well, since they're both C, the sky's the limit. You could do C major triad, C6, C7, C minor 7, C minor major 7, C minor 6, C dominant with any sort of alterations, kind of a sus thing. So now what if C is your melody note, but D flat is your bass note? D flat major 7 is a good option, D flat minor major 7, D flat major 6. That's kind of it. We can't do a dominant chord because C is our melody note. What if D is our bass note? We could do D minor 7, D7 with any sort of alternation, D7 sharp 5, D7 sharp 11, D7 flat 9, D7 sus, D11, anything like that with C as your melody note. E flat, or if C is your melody note, E flat's your bass note. And I'm going through this really fast, but you can always rewind and look back. But the exercise here is you could go through and figure out, for a given melody note, if I have any bass note beneath that, what does the chord quality have to be for it to fit? So C is your melody notes. If B is your bass note, you have like B dominant flat 9. Right now I'm doing B13 flat 9. I could do B7 flat 9 flat 13. That's kind of it. We can't do a B major 7 with a C. I mean, you could do anything, I guess, but that really doesn't work. Or B minor 7 with the C doesn't really work. What if your melody notes C, bass notes B flat? Anything where a natural 9 works. So B flat major 9, B flat minor 9, B flat minor major 7 with a 9, B flat minor 6 with a 9, B flat 7 with a 9, B flat 13 with a 9, B flat 13, B flat 7 flat 13, natural 9. What if your A is your bass note, C is your melody note? A minor 7. A dominant 7 sharp 9. A flat's your melody note. You can do A flat major 7 or A flat dominant 7. G is your melody bass note, C is your melody note. You can do like a sus chord kind of thing, or a minor chord with the sus note on top. If F sharp's your bass note, you can do like an F sharp major 7 sharp 11, or F sharp minor 7 flat 5, like a half diminished or a fully diminished. Or we could do like a dominant chord of some sort. If F's your bass note, we can do, that's the 5th. This leaves a bunch of opposite notes. Major 7, minor 7, dominant 7. And there's a bunch of different ways that can happen. But basically, if you could try and experiment by harmonizing a melody you already know and see if you can come up with different bass notes underneath it. So like, if we're gonna do like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, this is probably like the simplest way to harmonize it. 5, 1, 5, 1, 1, 4, 1, 5, 1, 4, 1, 5, 1, 4, 1, 5, 1, 5, 1. So if I want to get crazy with it, I could just maybe pick a pattern. This is kind of a Nick Semrad exercise, but have your bass note move in half steps and see what you come out. So if I get C as my melody note, I'll do C major for the first chord. Second chord, I'll do like a B7 sharp, or flat 9. I'm sorry, B7 flat 9. Next chord, I'm doing like the C over B flat till I get F over A. A flat 7 flat 9. G major, F sharp 7 flat 9. So check that out if I put that all together. My bass line is just going boom, 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 with the. So I put that all together. Let me fix the pedal. I can keep going. Kind of ended on a crazy one right there. So that was just kind of the bass descending in half steps. I could do the bass ascending in half steps. just because of that exercise I did earlier where I really tried to know, it's like whatever my melody note is, what my bass note is, what are the options? Because automatically some stuff is eliminated. So I'm going to try and say what I'm doing. C major 7, D flat major 7. I'm doing like a D minor 7, 11 here, D minor 11, E flat major 7. I'll do like an E minor 7 there, F major 7, F sharp 7, flat 9, F over G, A flat major 6, A minor 7, C over B flat, G over B, C major, D flat major 7. So just practicing going up like that and down like that, and there's a plethora of different types of patterns you can come up with. And then also understanding functional harmony, you could come up with like So I hope that kind of helped answer your question. Basically, figure out whatever your melody note is. You can put any bass note beneath it. You just have to know what the inner chord would be. If your melody note's a C and your bass note is an A flat, you're probably not going to try and do A flat minor because that C is really not going to work. But A flat major works, or A flat dominant, you know, and a bunch of those are just two of a bunch of options. Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm going to try and do a lot more of these, especially if people show me that they're interested. So please, if you like this, like, let me know, either leaving a comment or sharing it or just sending me a message or telling me in person. I'm going to keep making funny videos. I have a really funny video I was working on today that I haven't finished up. Ross says, awesome. Thanks for the insight. I'm scared to play out of the key, but this is jazz, baby. Definitely something to work on. Yeah, man. Yeah, just use I was going to say more, but I don't think I have more. Just use kind of what I was talking about, and hopefully you can come up with some stuff. This exercise definitely of just trying to see how you harmonize it might help you come up with stuff outside the key. Yeah, but cool. I'm going to log off, but I'll catch you guys next time. Look forward to the funny video tomorrow. I rap not one, but 2 verses, so it's basically the coolest thing ever. All right. Good night, everyone.